Alrighty, happy Tuesday morning, everyone. Welcome to Weekdays with Shane. Here on Tuesday, October 23rd. We're happy to have you with you. We are in Genesis again. We finished up Job last week. I know we missed yesterday. We had a busy day yesterday. Wasn't able to get to my normal video, but we're back in Genesis, and we're in this portion of Genesis where it's Abraham and Sarah, and they're kind of just waiting out. God's promised them a son, and they haven't had a son yet, and they're getting old, and they're saying, God said he's going to do this thing for me, and he hasn't done it yet, and what am I going to do? And so Abraham decides that God, his promise wasn't good enough, so I'm going to go off. I'm going to have a child with one of my servants and name him Ishmael. And that's going to be the answer to my problem, right? And I'm getting old. Sarah's old. How are we going to have kids? So obviously, I should just take this into my own hands. And God comes back and says, hey, bud, look, I promised you a child from your wife, Sarah, not from your servant. And I'm still going to do that. I'm going to bless and honor the child you had with your servant. I'm going to bless Ishmael, and he'll have 12 children and all this thing. But I'm still going to follow through with my promise, because God doesn't break promises. God doesn't go back on his word. God is faithful and true, and God never gives up on us or turns away from us. And so God says, remember, I made a promise with you. And Abraham says in chapter 17 of Genesis, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? Right? These are, honest questions that you would ask if you're 100 years old and your wife is 90 and God says you're going to have a kid. Be like, wait, what? I'm pretty old, God. Sarah's past baby birthing years. I'm past fathering child years. How's this going to happen? And God says, no, look, I've established my covenant with you that your offspring with Sarah will number like the stars, and I'm going to continue that through your child that you have with Sarah, not through Ishmael, but through the child you have with Sarah. And so God, I like to imagine that Abraham and Sarah are like, okay, God keeps telling us this is going to happen, but I don't know. I don't know. And actually, like 14 years passed between when Ishmael and when Isaac are born. So not only have they had all this time leading up to when Ishmael is born, where they're saying, I don't know how God's going to do this. We're old, and how are we going to have kids? Then they have Ishmael, and then they kind of sit there. I'm sure Sarah sits there and goes, man, it'd be nice to have a kid of my own. Be nice that I wish that God had fulfilled this promise through me. And then finally she reaches that age, that point where she goes, I just don't think it's going to happen. And in chapter 18, we get this story where Abraham, these three people visit Abraham. There's debates on were they people, were they angels, whatever. We know that they're three people, and Abraham sets up a meal for them and gets them cakes made and gets them stuff to drink. And when they're there, they ask, where's Sarah, your wife? And Abraham says, well, she's in the tent. And the God says to him, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. Right? And Sarah hears this and laughs, right? She laughs because she's like, okay, sure, I'm going to have a son. She actually says, after I'm worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? She says, I'm old and worn out. My husband's old, and now you're telling me I'm going to have the pleasure of having this child that I've been asking for. And God says, why did Sarah laugh? And why did she say, shall I indeed bear a child now that I'm old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? Man, that's when God comes in with that little truth bomb. Is anything too hard for me? I'm God. Is anything too hard? I've watched over you. I've protected you all through this journey. I've gotten you to here all these different times, all these different things. I've watched over you. I've been with you. I haven't gone back on a promise yet. I've fulfilled everything I've said I'm going to do. Is anything too hard for me? And it's kind of reminiscent of Job, where Job's questioning God, and God comes in and says, okay, I did all this. I spoke this into existence. I care about the big things. I care about the little things. All of this is in my control. Remember, I'm God and you're not. And he says to Abraham, is anything too hard for God? And man, if I'm in Abraham's shoes, I'm like, oh, nope, you're right. I did this on my own time. I did this in my own way. I tried to take control of this. I tried to be God, and now where's it gotten me? I haven't listened to what God's had to say. I haven't followed through with him. So today for us, what about us? Do we sometimes still need God to show up and go, is anything too hard for me? That thing you've been praying about, or that issue you've been having, or whatever it is anything too hard for me? I got it. I got control of this. This is all my creation. I have ownership over this. I'm God. Romans tells us if God is for us, who can be against us? Right? So where's our faith today in God, right? Where's Abraham and Sarah's faith? Their faith wandered from God. And we see that same idea, that same story, that same concept come alive again in their son Isaac's life when his wife is barren. And we see that he learns from his dad's mistakes. His dad runs off and tries to do it on his own ways. And Isaac instead stays faithful to God and prays to God that God would come through with this. So where's our faith this morning? Is our faith in God that his promise is true, that God is faithful, that God has not turned his back on us, that God does not lie, that God does not give up on us, that God is not going to rebuke us, because man will. I said this Sunday morning that man will give up on us. Man will let us down. Man will break our hearts, but God won't. So where is our faith? Where's our hope? Where's our trust? Is it in man or is it in God? Abraham had placed it on himself. That's how we get Ishmael. But when he turned his focus again to God and remember that God is in control, that God is going to do this, that's when we see Isaac and we see that promise fulfilled and that covenant carried on. So I want to thank you for watching this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday morning. As always, like this, share this, and we'll see you tomorrow.